All right, so first things first, I'm just going to put a comment at the top, and I'm going to say this is an example of a choose your own adventure game. Y'all remember these kind of little games? I used to get books from the library when I was a kid, and it'd be like, turn to page 37 if you choose this option, or turn to page 50 if you want to go down this trail. Y'all remember that? I used to love those. All right, so first things first, no matter what user-defined functions we have to do our tasks for us, what function does every Python program have to have now that we've learned about functions? The main. Very good. So the main is where all of the actual like calling of the other functions and all the logic of the game is going to go. So essentially, your code that controls the game goes in the main. So we got to define a main. And remember, the main does not have any parameters ever passed to it when you go to define it or when you call it. All right, for now, y'all remember the word I can put in there to just hold my place? Pass. Very good. So we're going to pass for now. And then remember, nothing happens even if I define a main and I put a bunch of code in the main. What do I have to do with it for it to execute? Call the main. Excellent. And that is that funky line of code that's an if statement. If double underscore, and it's actually right here, name. So double underscore, name, double underscore. No spaces in that, by the way. In other words, if there's a function in this file that's called main, all right, so this part is a string. This part is not a string. So in other words, if we can find a main inside this file that's been defined, we're going to run it. All right. So if I run it right now, nothing's going to happen, but I also shouldn't get any errors. All right. And if I want to, instead of this pass, why don't I go ahead and put a print statement in there that says, welcome to whatever game, just some kind of introduction. And you don't have to do exactly what I'm doing right now. You can actually go ahead and start switching it up right now, right? Do something maybe similar to what I'm doing. Or you can do exactly what I do and then change it later, right? All right, so I'm going to say, welcome to Donald's Flight School. So I'm going to make a game where Donald Duck learns how to fly. And the game is a great time to use these emojis. The emojis are really fun when you're doing a game, right? So maybe in a little bit, maybe something will happen to him and he'll get hurt and we'll do like an explosion emoji or something like that, right? You use the emojis as much as you want to in the game, so I think it makes it fun. Let's see if there's a duck on here. There we go. All right, cool. All right. Now, do I have any characters in my main yet? Nah. Remember, at least in my example, and probably in your example too, you most likely want your characters to be these dictionaries, because when you think of a character and their different attributes, well, the attributes have to have a name and they have to have a value. So you're 99% probably going to have, even if you create like a race car game, it'd be like car one, race car one, right? If you create a game that uses, I don't know, cards, you might still want to make each card be a dictionary, because it would have what? A color, a suit, a number, and a value, right? So no matter what object it is in your game, you're probably going to be representing it like this, okay? So don't think it has to be just a regular character. You could be making a game about whatever, anything. All right. So I'm going to create a function, and it's going to be a value returning function. We're going to create some kind of character item in our game. I'm going to make this Donald character. Okay. You can make your character or your object whatever you want it to be. So I'm going to create a new function. And what's the keyword to make a new function? DEF, which stands for define, right? All right. And then I'm going to call this function, maybe I'll call it create Donald. Now, if you're not making a duck called Donald for your game, then you should name yours something else, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and say name is equal to Donald. All right. I'm going to go ahead and do the health points and the flyability, and then we'll make that loop to ask the user what item should he start off with. Okay. So in my game, at least, I'm going to make a... Now, this is another place where I could hard code this 100, or I could ask the user how many health points should your character start off with, right? And bless you. Name could have also been a value that I get from the user if you want to in your game, right? Or you as the developer can decide I'm going to have a character called Donald. And then in my game, I've got that flyability that I want to hopefully increase. All right. And then I'm also now going to create an empty dictionary called inventory. But there's not going to be anything in it yet. Good morning. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a loop that's going to say to the user, should Donald start with any items, or what items should Donald start? Something like that, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say item equals, I'm going to get some input from the user. And I'll say should name, right? I'm using my variable name. It'll put Donald in there for me. All right, so just because I want to make sure that my user does a Y or N, I'm going to tell them right there in that string, give me a Y or an N. Now, if I want to make a while loop that keeps getting items from the user and adding them into the list, anybody have any idea what should my while loop look like? While, what variable is going to control our loop? Item, very good. While item, how about this? What if we say, what would stop the loop? What do we want to stop the loop? N, right? N, okay. While item does not equal N, right? What can I do with item so that if they put a capital N in there, it'll still work? Y'all remember? Yes, dot lower, right? So just in this one little instance right here in the while loop, I can take whatever item is and I can say, okay, make that whole entire string lowercase so that even if they put in a capital N, it'll convert it to a lowercase n, and it'll say, okay, if that's not, if it doesn't match this, go into the loop. If this is a little n, break the loop. All right, so what should we be doing in here? As a matter of fact, it's probably not the best idea to call that item, but I'm just going to leave it. What do I need to do now? I need to get an object from the user, right? Because I have to know what is the object that I want to add to the list. And if we made it inside the loop, they are adding something, right? So let's create a variable called object. I'll just call it obj, right? We'll make it an input from the user, and we'll say I'm probably going to come back in here in a minute and put some empty print statements to kind of space everything out. All right. If I run this right now, what kind of loop did I just create? What is it? A while loop. Yeah, that's right. You're not wrong about that. There's something bad about it, though. Will it ever end? Because what variable never gets to change its value? What is it? Item. Very good. Excellent. Item is the variable that controls the loop. Right now, item is whatever it was up here, and it never has an opportunity to become anything different, right? So we have to allow the user to give us a different value for item, or else we're going to be stuck in an endless loop because item's value is never allowed to change. But yet we're saying that's the thing that controls the loop. If that's the thing that controls the loop, we need to give it the chance to actually change so it can control the loop, right? Otherwise, we just got a loop that goes forever and ever and ever. And maybe we should say it differently down here, right? We should probably switch up what this says. This should probably say something like add another item, question mark, yes or no. Still one thing that we're missing in here. Can anybody tell me what it is? There's some logic that's missing inside of our while loop. We're asking the user to give us an item to add to the inventory. Very good. We never actually took that item that the user gave us and added it to the list called inventory, right? We acted like we were going to, but we never wrote the code to do it. So we need some code in here to actually add the object to the list, right? And it needs to happen in here before we get the next item. So y'all were absolutely right. It's the append method, right? Y'all remember what it looks like?
Dot append.
Dot append, all right, very good. What comes before the dot append? Inventory, very good. The name of the list, all right, so we say, which list are we messing with? Inventory. What are we going to do with it? We're going to dot append something to it. And then what is the something that you're going to append? Very good. Well, not item. Object. Object. Okay. I don't think it was good that we named this variable right here item. That's a little confusing, right? So maybe instead of calling it item, you could call it add item. I think that makes more sense. Now, if you had an item and it's working and that makes sense to you, you can leave it that. I think it makes more sense to call it add item. How can we make sure that once this loop ends, that everything got into the inventory? Print it. Very good. Excellent. So what I'm going to do is, should I be printing it right here? No. What's wrong with printing it right there? I'm inside the loop, right? So that means it would print the list every time the loop ran. So essentially, every time we added something to the loop, it would print the list again. We only want to see the list one time, right? At the very end. So what should I do with my cursor? Back, right? Unindent, essentially. You too. All right, so now I'm not inside the while loop, and just because I can't help it, I like to put that comment in there. It helps me visually. All right, so now I can say you successfully created I'll make this an F string, and I'll say whoever's, you successfully created Donald's inventory, and then maybe underneath it, I will actually print the inventory itself, so then we could double check, right? And just because I can't help it, I have to go in here and throw some empty print statements in here. Otherwise, my brain gets overwhelmed. All right, let's see. Maybe every time before I say add another item, I'll put an empty print statement in there. All right. And remember, I'm using this variable name right here because maybe you don't hard code your name in there. Maybe the user is choosing the name of their own character, right? All right. So we're not actually done yet because we have now we have a value for name. We have a value for inventory, right? We have a value for health points and for flyability. But did we ever write the line of code that actually creates this dictionary object? No. I'm curious to see if it'll run right now and print my inventory. I'm going to see if that part will work right now. As a matter of fact, if I'm going to try to do that, what do I have to do in the main? Very good. I have to, this function right now is only defined. It's never been called, right? We didn't call it from the main. So I need to call the function before the code is actually ever going to execute. So I got to come down here inside the main, and I've got to call the function to create the character. All right, and I called my function create Donald. You might maybe you called yours something different, right? And why did I have to come down here and do that? Does this code run just because I typed it in there? Like when this program runs, is it going to execute this function? Only if we called it from the main, right? If we did not have this line of code to call that function, it would never execute. It would just be there, defined, hanging out, waiting on us to use it, right? But because we called it from within the main, now the code will execute one time, right? All right, welcome to Donald's Flight School. Should Donald have any items to begin? I'm going to say Y and hope for the best. Okay. So right now, I can just put whatever I want in there, right? There's no restrictions on what, I could put numbers, I could put whatever. But because I didn't convert anything to an integer or a float, whatever I put in here, what kind of data type is Python going to see it as? A string. Very good, right? Because we just used the input function. We didn't convert anything to another data type. So whatever we put in here is going to be a string in the list. I'm just going to randomly add some items in here. All right, maybe he has a fish. We'll add another item. Maybe he has a lasso. I don't know. And maybe he has a key. All right, I'm going to say no. I'm done adding items. So give him 3 items to start. All right. Did it create a list of those strings? All right, cool. So now we know that inside the inventory, we are having a successful creation of the list with the items that we want, right? So we're good. That worked. Great. All right. Now we have to actually create the dictionary that's going to represent our character, right? Because we have all these different variables right now, but we haven't put them together in one data structure to represent the character. So I'm going to be outside of my loop, right? But I do have to be indented one time because I'm still inside of this create Donald function. Does that make sense? Make sure you're at least indented once because you should still be inside your function. So I'm right here. It should be lined up where we printed the inventory. Because that was after the loop broke, right? So we're not inside the loop, but we are inside of the function itself. So if you're all the way against the left, you should tab one time. All right. And now we're going to actually create the dictionary that represents the character, or card, or car, or giant monster, or whatever your program is making. All right. So it doesn't necessarily really matter what I call my dictionary right now. I'm just going to call it character. You can call it whatever you want. That's just a variable name, right? That's not the actual name attribute of our character. All right, so I have to now make a key value pair. What would the key value pair look like for the name attribute? What would y'all call the key? Name, exactly right. Now the keys almost always are strings, right? Because it's a word that's describing the value. All right. In my program, let me zoom out. What should I put in for the name? All right. Let me scroll up though. I could put the string Donald right there inside, right? I could. What else could I put as my value? Very good. I could use this variable name. That's what I'm going to use. That was the whole point in me creating this variable to begin with, because in my program, I'm choosing the name Donald as the programmer, but you might have an input statement right here that allows the user to name their own character, right? Then we would need to use this variable. So I'm just going to put in here the key is the string name. The value is the variable name. Does that make sense? This is just a string, right? That could say anything. This is the variable that I created way up here at the top that I assigned the string Donald to. But I didn't have this variable right here. I could have hard-coded the string Donald right here, right? All right, very good. So let's move on to our next attribute. What do I separate these key value pairs from each other with? A comma, very good. All right, cool. If we're following up here, the next thing is inventory, right? And remember, key value pairs, the key is almost always just a string that's going to represent that value. So guess what? I'm going to call it inventory. Why not, right? What is my value there? A variable called what? Not add item. Add item is what is controlling the while loop. But what is the while loop actually producing? A list. The list is what we want. And what's the list called? Inventory. Very good. So yes, add item was used in our loop, but the whole point of the loop was to create this list called inventory with items inside of it, right? So that list called inventory is what we're going to assign right there. Remember when we ran it and it had the 3 items inside? That list of those 3 items is what would be assigned to inventory right there. Does that make sense to you guys? I really want this part to make sense. All right, so this key value pair in the dictionary is a string called inventory. Its value is that list that we just created, that we allowed the user to keep adding items into. All right. And then next, at least in my game, just to keep it simple, health points. and I have a variable up here, right? I created a variable called health points. So that's what I'm going to assign as the value there. And you don't have to, but I like to space these out. All right, and my last key value pair in this dictionary, I called flyability. And I also created a variable for that up at the top. So my variable for that is called flyability. So you could create a variable up here called inventory, and you could go ahead and hard code some values right into here. And then if you don't want the user to be able to give any more starting items, you wouldn't even need this while loop at all. If you wanted them to always start off with, you know, a rock and a hammer, then you would hard code rock and hammer right in there. You wouldn't need any of this down here anymore. And then you could still do it exactly the same way that we did it. Now, you could hard code your list directly in here if you wanted to. You could not even create a variable there, right? It would look like this. Don't do this if you're following me. This is just an example. And I see you up to, like, I got you. Give me just a second. So I could do this, right? But that would not give the user the ability. So if you don't want the user to be able to choose the starting items, you want to choose the starting items, then you do it like that, right?
But could I give starting items and still give the ability?
Yes, you could do both. Okay. So what you would do in that case is when you go ahead and create your initial, how do I redo? Okay. What you would do then, Dale, is up here when you first create the inventory list, you would go ahead and hard code a couple items in there to begin with. And you still, all this while loop would still work perfectly fine. It would just add to whatever you already had inside the list. It would append it to the end of the list. Okay, so if you only want your user to be able to add certain items in there, then what you would need to do is you would need to, somewhere in here, you would need to have like a print function, and it would show all the options that they could possibly add. And then you would need to have an if statement inside your while loop. And it would be like, if the item that the user entered is in the list of acceptable items, only then would you add it into the list. Does that make sense? You would still have a while loop that every time the user gave you another item, you would check to see, is that item part of what is allowed? Only if it is allowed would we add it into it. Otherwise, it'd probably say something like that item does not exist in the game or something like that, right? What I've got to do now is I'm super close to actually having a character in my main that can do some stuff. All right, super close. So up here in my create Donald function, the last thing that I'm doing is I'm creating this dictionary called character, right? Is this dictionary character not the thing that we want to end up into our main? Because aren't we going to be changing these values as the game progresses, right? So I'm going to have to access this character dictionary in my main so that I can be, you know, adding to the health points, right? Or maybe something happens and he breaks his wing and he loses some flight points for a little bit, right? So I'm going to have to be able to change these objects, meaning I'm going to have access to this dictionary. Right now, the only place that this dictionary exists is inside of this function called create Donald. Right? The character dictionary does not exist within the main. How can we get this character dictionary from this function into the main? All right. So this is going to need to be a value returning function, because when we call this function from within the main, we want it to give us this character dictionary, right? That way the character dictionary will exist down here in the main, and then we can continue on with the logic, right? Like maybe we give the option, does Donald turn right or left down this path? If he turns right, maybe he gains some health points somehow. If he turns left, he trips and breaks his wing, right? So we need to be able to access this down here. In order to do that, we have to say, okay, from this define or create Donald function, I'm going to return that dictionary called character. All right, so the function's still going to do all the stuff it did before, but now it's going to be giving us something back when we call it. It's going to be giving us this character dictionary when we go to call the function. Okay? Beautiful. So now that we know that the create Donald function is going to return an object to us, all right, it's going to give us something back, which is this dictionary called character. So when we are down here in the main now and we call create Donald, it's going to be trying to give something back to us. It's going to be trying to give us that dictionary. But the problem is that we haven't created a variable to hold that dictionary that create Donald is giving us back. Does anybody know what we need to do on line 35 so that we can end up with some kind of variable that holds the dictionary that that function returns? It's the left side. Very good. Right? So it's over here. So where do I put my variable that's going to catch that dictionary that's returned from create Donald? Not in the parentheses. Fine. You can call it whatever you want, but no matter what name you put here, it's going to be holding, the value of that is going to be this. Okay. The function is the value for this variable, because what is the function producing? The function is producing this dictionary called character. So when the function produces that dictionary, where are we going to assign it? Down here in the main. We have to have some way to refer to it in the main, and we refer to it by assigning a variable here so that when this returns the dictionary, we catch it and assign it to this variable. All right, so you don't have to call it character down here. You could call it char1. Maybe you have a function up here where the user gets to choose everything, and you then allow the user to make two characters. You could make this function only give you back user given characters, right? So the character determines the user determines the name, the inventory, the attributes, everything, right? Then you could use that same function and you could create two characters in your game. You would just call the function twice, each time assigning it to a new variable. Does that make sense? All right. So now what I should be able to do down here is I should say, okay, let me run a test. And my test is going to be to print out my character. Let me run that. All right, sure. I'll just give him one item. I'll give him a worm. All right. So I probably need a print statement somewhere because I can't stand that. But this is the line of code that is here. All right. So we called the function to create the dictionary. It did. It gave us the dictionary back. We assigned it to this variable called character, and then we printed out the character. All right. So this line, printing out the character from within the main, is this right here. After I've successfully added the worm to the dictionary or to the inventory. And the reason we made the inventory a list, right, is so that we can add to and you can loop through the list. Say your user needs to have a key to move on to the next step, but they don't, right? What would you do? You'd write a loop. You'd say loop through the inventory, and if key in inventory, then allow them to unlock the door, right? If the key is not in the inventory, well, the door can't be opened until they do something else and find the key. So now that I have the character in my main, and I know that I have access to that dictionary that represents my character, this is where you're going to want to start some of your logic, okay? So maybe you give the choice for them to move left or move right. All right, I'm going to code it up real quick, just a simple example. So let me write a print statement. I guess this should be an input statement. Let's say direction. Input. Take the path to the right or to the left. And I'm just going to assume right now that the user's going to type in the word right or left, okay? So I'll say if direction equals left, I'm going to put a comment in here that I'm going to say call a function. Because I'm going to create a function that's going to be whatever happens if they turn left, right? If direction is equal to right, I'm going to call a different function. And right now, it's going to be mad at me, and it's going to, it's because I don't have any code inside this if statement. I could put a pass in there, and then that error would go away. All right. So if that's the case, I'm saying call a function here and call a different function here, then I need to go create two functions, right? I'm going to name one move left and name the other function move right, okay? Or right path, left path, something like that. So let me come back up here to the top. Outside of the main, I'm going to create my next user-defined function. All right, and I'm going to call it move right. That's wrong, my bad. All right. Here's the thing. This move right, I think we can change the dictionary without having to return anything from here on. Let's see. All right, I'm going to do something super simple. Move right. I'm going to print. You have encountered a big hawk. Maybe I'll throw an emoji in there. Why not? Put a big bird. And then I'll say, all right. What I want to do now down here is I want to take my character object. I want to take his flight ability and decrement it. And I know that'll put him in the negative, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. If he goes in the negative, he's just going to have to do enough to get back out and get to the positive, okay? But here's the thing. In order to actually decrement one of these attributes, this function has to have access to our character, right? It has to have access to the character dictionary, or it can't go in there and change one of the attributes. So if this needs access to the character object, remember, inside these parentheses right here, when you go to define a function or when you call a function, you can give it some parameters, which means information that it's going to get from somewhere else when we call this function. So when we call this function, we need to pass it in our character object. If we call move right from within the main and we pass in the character function or character dictionary, now this function has full access to that character dictionary. All right, so now we're going to decrement the fly ability attribute. From my character dictionary, I need access to an attribute. Which attribute is it that I need access to? Fly ability, right? So I need to look back up here and see exactly how did I call that attribute. I called it just like this, right? I'm going to copy it because that way I know I won't make any mistakes. So I'm just getting the key of the attribute, but I don't want to mess with the key. I want to mess with the value of it. But in order to get the value, I have to pass in the key. So this is essentially saying, go into the character dictionary and give me back the value where this is the key. All right. What do we want to do to the fly ability value? Because remember, this, imagine this being that 0. This is representing the value, which is a 0 right now. I'm okay with my end number being negative. So what should I do with this? Subtract from it. Yeah. Can I go straight in here and say take whatever that value is and subtract from it? Yes. You can, right? Exactly. Absolutely. Let's do it. Okay, so a random is awesome for games. A matter of fact, if we didn't do it today, next class we probably would have ended up using the random library. So let me import random at the top of my program. All right, and if I import random, now I can use the random library down here, and I can say, what are we going to subtract from the fly ability? Let's do a random dot random integer, and we will make it from 2 to, I don't know, 2 to 10. So I got to put an 11 in there. Remember, it goes up to, but not including the last value, right? So I'll say decrement the fly ability attribute by a random value from 2 to 10. A matter of fact, I don't like to do it like this. What we really should do is we should say damage is equal to this. Why am I doing that? Because now I can come up here and I can make a print statement. And I can say, if I want to get the character's name, I could do it like this. Character name. I could have used an F string there if I wanted to. I could have wrapped that in an F string. Let me just go ahead and make it an F string. Sorry, I know I'm doing a lot quickly. Okay. The reason I do it like that is because I want to be able to see what the wing damage is being decremented by. I don't want it to be a mystery and me have to do the math, right? If I do it this way, this random number is assigned to a variable called damage. Then I can actually print and say, hey, my character took this much damage. Then I can actually do the code to remove that amount of damage from my ability. And I know it seems strange, but I do not think we have to return the new character object from this list, because I think dictionaries are changed in place, meaning that when I pass this dictionary up to this function and I do something to it, everywhere in the program that the dictionary exists is going to be changed without me having to return the new dictionary. Let's also print out the new fly ability. Let's say I'm going to take this string right here, probably this whole print statement, and I'm going to say character name, and I will say character names new flight ability is, and then on this side I'm going to take this, which is what actually gives me the fly ability. So it's going to look like this. What we should be able to do now is hopefully come down here again, and I'm going to do a couple things. Right now, I'm going to leave if direction equals right. I'm just going to put a print statement in there right now so it doesn't get mad at me. And I'll say to be continued. All right, but I apologize. My bad. It wasn't move right that should be continued, right? Move left should be continued. I apologize. So if direction equals left, to be continued. If direction equals right, what should we do? What is it? Run. You need to make an escape option. You need to make a function called escape, right? Hey, you can make an escape function, and then you could create a random value using the random, and maybe if the value is less than 10, they escaped. If the value is more than 10, they have to stay and fight, right? So you can use the random in a lot of ways. What we need to do is call our function move right? What did we say we were going to pass into the move right function? What parameter does it take? A character. So we have to pass in our character from down here in the main when we go to call the move right function. So that's what we have to pass in down here, because it doesn't know which dictionary we're talking about unless we pass it in, right? So then when it comes up here, it says, oh, I'm doing all this on a dictionary. They must want me to use the dictionary that they passed in, right? And the last thing that we should do is we should come down here inside the main, and we should print our character object again as a test, because down here in the main, we want to make sure that in the main, our character has actually lost some flyability, right? We should see, obviously, that should be 0 to begin with, and then after we move right, it should be decremented. I'm going to give it a run. And the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to ask me, should he have any items? Sure, I'll give him a fish to begin with. That's all he needs. All right, I probably need to comment this stuff out eventually, right? It's okay for testing right now, but you don't want to turn in an assignment that has a bunch of test prints in there. So we said we need to take the path to the right. Isn't that the one that we wrote code for? All right. And so what happens? We took the path to the right. We have encountered a big hawk. Oh, it damaged your flight wing. Donald, you took wing damage of 4. It didn't. It did not make the change. Y'all see that? his flight ability is still 0. So something's wrong. We might need to say this. We might need to say character flyability is equal to, or character flyability minus equals. I don't think it's actually updating the original flyability attribute. Let me see what that does. So I just did minus equals. So I take what this already was and then subtract the damage from it. Let's see if that works. I'm not going to give them any items this time. We'll take the path to the right. There we go. Did y'all see that? That changed everything. Okay, so what was happening was it was taking whatever the flyability was, and it was subtracting the damage from it. But then it was doing nothing with whatever this number was right here. This number was just out there. Like, okay, cool. So if we do this, that means that we're taking whatever this already was, we're subtracting the damage from it, and then we're reassigning that new value back to that attribute. So if I run it again, I should get a different value this time, right? Because we're using that random module. So we'll say no. We'll go to the right. All right, and now you can see I did not put any items in the inventory, and his flyability was decremented by 6. All right, so I think that's a good place to start, because there's examples of kind of every little thing, but you're going to have to make it your own, right? Get creative with it.